Most people see a sunken wooden boat and assume it's worthless. And most of the time, they're absolutely right. But this one is different, because right now, there's a historic wooden sailing schooner sitting underwater in Japan with an asking price of $100,000. And that raises some very obvious questions. $100,000, is that real? Are they serious? Is a sunken boat really worth that kind of money? We're going to try to answer that question. And the answer might surprise you. When most people see this ad, warning bells immediately go off in your brain, and your limbic system takes over and your hand clicks the close button. It's a visceral response. No way. But there's one important factor that a lot of people have never had explained to them before. Water isn't what destroys wood. Oxygen does. Drying cycles do. Cold, stable water slows biological activity, so fungi and bacteria don't grow as fast. And those are what cause traditional rot in wood boats. So a wooden boat that stays submerged in cool water can remain far more intact than people expect. That's why they recently found Ernest Shackleton's ship Endurance under the Arctic ice, preserved almost perfectly after more than a century. This is an extreme example, obviously, but it proves the principle. Cold, stable water can be remarkably gentle on wood. And while Osaka isn't Antarctica, it's also not warm, tropical water either. So the water itself may not be the most damaging part of this story. Her name was Vagrant, which I'll admit always makes me smile a little bit. Zingaro, vagrant, same family of words. This was a boat built to move, to wander, to live a life at sea, not to sit still. And that turns out to matter more than you might think. Nathaniel Green Hershoff didn't design boats the way we do today. He drew them from his head. No computer modeling, no simulations. Today we use things like computational fluid dynamics. That's software that simulates how water flows around a hull to predict drag and lift and performance before anything is ever built. Hershoff didn't have that. He relied on intuition, experience, and an extraordinary understanding of structure and balance. And somehow it worked over and over and over and over again. That is incredibly rare. He wasn't just an engineer, the man was an artist. And that's why his boats feel coherent in a way that's hard to explain, but easy to recognize. If you want to understand that lineage properly, go visit the Hershoff Marine Museum in Bristol, Rhode Island. It's not nostalgia, it's a masterclass in how these boats were actually conceived. Vagrant was commissioned by Harold Vanderbilt in 1910. And amazingly, she was built in just 60 days at the Hershoff Manufacturing Company. 60 days. That is insane. The wait list for most boats today is 18 months, minimum. Want to know what she cost? $26,800. Adjusted to today's money, that's roughly $900,000 to $1 million for a 100-foot boat. That is not happening today. Not even close. Now let's look inside the boat. The joinery, the proportions, the intent. This is labor, skill, and time locked into wood and beautifully decorated. And that matters when we talk about the restoration. So that brings us to the real question. Would it be cheaper or smarter to restore this boat or to build a new one from the original plans? At first glance, starting from scratch sounds safer. You have the drawings, you have measurements, you have unknown damage, but plans don't give you aged timber that's already moved and settled and a hand-fitted structure and patina and provenance. They don't give you history. A new build might be incredible, but it won't be this boat. And a surprising amount of the major structure, the keel, the keelson, the floors, the frames, and even some of the interior joinery might not need to be replaced at all. Not because it's untouched, but because it's been continuously submerged. In a sense, it's been pickled by the ocean for a while. And remember, some of this wood is over 100 years old. In human terms, that's not destruction. That's more like a very long bath. Enter the J-class yachts. These are some of the coolest, most beautifully built boats in modern history. And there are only 3 original J-class yachts left in the world. Most of the ones you see sailing today are replicas. Exceptionally expensive, beautifully built replicas. All told, there are fewer than 10 active J-class yachts worldwide. And the reason that matters is simple. The world has already decided they're worth preserving. Condition matters less than category. Consensus protects value. If this were a J-class boat, it would already be gone. People would absolutely lose their minds if they could buy a sunken J-class for $100,000. This schooner doesn't live in that same category. There are many more Herreshoff schooners afloat, though not many with this pedigree or history. So the value argument here is complicated. Let's talk about a more recent example. I'm sure you guys have watched Samson Boat Company, and you've seen what restoration really looks like. Leo rebuilt Tally Ho, a 35-foot wooden boat. It took years of full-time labor from him and many volunteers. And what made it possible wasn't just skill. It was audience support and hundreds of thousands of subscribers and crowdfunding and the freedom to make decisions that a normal budget would never allow. Now scale that up. Tally Ho is 35 feet. Vagrant is over 100 feet. And I hate to tell you, but boat costs don't scale linearly with length. They scale exponentially. Every additional foot costs more than the one before it, in materials, labor, complexity, and time. So this isn't 3 times the work. It's a completely different category of problem, which raises the obvious question, if someone as capable as Leo hasn't bought this boat, why not? Same reason you're hesitating. Do you see the amount of work in this thing? This is millions of dollars and 5, 6, maybe more years of effort. So why ask $100,000? Because that's not really the price of the boat. It's the price of admission. It filters out fantasy and invites only people who understand what comes next. In that sense, this isn't a crazy ask. It's a filter. They might even give the boat away for free. But do you know what that would do if they advertise it for free? Every Tom, Dick, and Pierre on the planet will be calling this poor broker after seeing just the first photo. It would be ridiculous. And before you go contacting that poor broker, this boat will take millions of dollars. As Albert Einstein said, sometimes one pays most for the things one gets for nothing. So, is this boat worth millions of dollars? The honest answer is probably not. Boats in general are not very good investments, but the idea might be. The process, the stewardship. Life isn't about the destination of having a perfect schooner. It's about restoring a work of art, an important piece of maritime history, and some boats are worth saving. Some boats are worth rebuilding, and some are worth admiring and walking away from. This one sits somewhere on that line. You have to decide where it is for you. In the meantime, I'll keep an eye on it for you, okay? Thank you for watching. Fair winds and following seas.